So Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho is definitely one of the director's more different films. So if you're used to Edgar Wright, you probably know him for stuff like Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead and At World's End and Baby Driver. And you might notice that all these films have one thing in common, which is that they are all very like fast-paced, exciting, and humorous films. Just very like I guess like giddy would be the right way to describe them. Even like I also forgot like Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Same deal there. Also another giddy, exciting, fast-paced, little bit of an action romp. Yeah, that's how most of his films has been. So Last Night in Soho is definitely a change for the director. This is like I know that like Shaun of the Dead is like a horror comedy, but this feels like more of Edgar Wright's first straight horror film. So Last Night in Soho takes place in, well, it doesn't start in London. Rather, it starts just outside of London, where, and I'm going to look up the notes here because I know I'm going to mess this up. I know I'm going to mess up a whole bunch of names because I'm terrible with names. So it starts with Eloise Turner, played by Thomasin McKenzie. And she is an aspiring fashion designer who wants to go to London to show off her talents. She's been working working with cloth for a long time and making clothes, but she's also really obsessed with the '60s. She loves like the music and the fashion and the culture of the time. She really loves the 1960s. Except when she gets to London, it's not quite how she dreamed it would be. Before she even gets there, she's haunted by the visions of her mother. Just a little bit. Like, her mother died a while ago, and it feels like she hasn't quite felt that she could get her goodbyes in. So, the spirit of her mother doesn't quite haunt her so much as just kind of like loom behind her. Like, it's always something that's foremost in her mind. Like, she can basically I don't quite want to say can fully see ghosts, but like in her mind, she can see her mother at various points in her life. So when she gets to London, her grandmother has told her that basically, look, London's dangerous, and you can't really trust guys around there, so be cautious. And she's like, oh, don't worry, I'll be fine. Even though when she gets there, the taxi driver's really creepy. So yeah, understandable. Like, yeah, okay, maybe London isn't all that safe as I thought it would be. But eventually she gets to her dorm room, and she tries to hook up with other people there and tries to connect with her roommate. But she slowly realizes that my roommates don't like me, and I'm not that well accepted here, and I'm just really not comfortable in the dorm. Like she does like going to fashion school, and it's something she wants to do, but she needs a change of scenery. So she ends up going to an apartment building, fairly old one, to get a room of her own. And the rules are fairly strict, but she's like, yeah, you know what? It's fine. I won't bring it home anyone. It'll be okay. But then, when she goes to sleep in the room, she has a dream. Or a dream. I guess, like, what's the right word for it? Not so much a dream as much as she gets, like, a flash of memories of someone who used to live in that room before. Because when she goes to sleep, she's immediately transported to the 1960s and kind of semi-embodies the body of Sandy, this kind of like 1960s singer who's played by Anna Taylor-Joy. And at first, like, Eloise, when she experiences this, it's like she's in heaven. She's in 1960s London. She's wearing a cool dress. She gets to just zoom right into like clubs and just hook up with like the elite. And she ends up connecting fairly well with this man called Jack, who's played by Matt Smith. And Jack has basically said, like, look, you're pretty sexy. You got a good voice on you. I could get you into clubs and all that. And they have a great night of like drinking and dancing and just having fun. And Eloise wakes up, she's like, oh man, this is the best thing ever. I'm living in a haunted apartment where I get to go to the 60s every time I go to sleep. Sounds pretty cool until she keeps going with the dream and she realizes that, the life of this woman wasn't all that great. She only got to sing at like trashy clubs. Jack treated her like dirt, and Jack abused her and essentially just pimped her out and treated her like crap. And so at one point, Eloise witnesses a vision of a murder that took place in her room. And then she's just terrified of this, like, oh my god, this woman was murdered by Jack, and I gotta figure out who did it. Because no one has reported on this. And very concerning. So for the rest of the film, it essentially becomes a murder mystery with like supernatural elements, because like the ghosts of the past of those who like supposedly had abused this woman are coming back and trying to like target Eloise. So it's a mix. So it's kind of like a supernatural murder mystery, more or less. There's a little bit of a twist involved with it. I won't reveal it too much. I will say though, it does kind of turn the film on its head, where either you're with the film on this angle or you kind of despise the film, because I've seen it go both ways. Like a lot of people are like, oh, the twist is actually really clever and it forces you to look at the film in a much different way. And other people just said, well, this kind of contradicts the message that was going on within like the first half of the film. So it doesn't really gel here. For me personally, I'm a little bit mixed on it. Like I can understand why people come from that angle. Like, okay, this kind of contorts like a different version of it, but at the same time, like the twist is kind of admirable, and I love how it does kind of become shocking when you get to that third act, and it becomes like almost like not quite like a psychological supernatural horror film, but something you can do. Like if you've seen Perfect Blue, it kind of ends the same way as Perfect Blue, more or less. It depends on your perspective of like identity and being comfortable with yourself and realizing that the people you knew are not the people that you can trust. So I'll save that twist for anyone who wants to see the film like that. But Edgar Wright's style is still very much in this horror film. Like he hasn't lost his touch for great editing and just like great uses of like camera work and little visual effects here and there. Like the most interesting thing is that Eloise, when she's experiencing the flashbacks with Sandy, she gets to sometimes be in the moment and other times is in the reflection. Like there are moments when like Sandy is like going across stairs and there's a mirror in the background and you see Eloise right next to like Sandy's reflection. So she's like an outsider looking in. And then other times when Sandy is dancing with Jack, you'll notice that they trade off. Like Sandy will like, you know, swing to the side around the camera, and then Eloise will come around the camera. And you can tell there's definitely some practical effects trickery here where like Eloise is ducking out of frame and then like Sandy comes in and then Sandy goes out and then Eloise comes back in. A little bit of hokey pokey going on there. Probably could use better word choice there, but yeah, there's some cleverness in there. I like when Eloise tries to like break out of the reflection, tries to say like, Sandy, don't let this happen to you. She's basically like shattering glass. The visions of the ghosts are truly terrifying, the way their faces are obscured and kind of decaying and kind of like blurred in the background. There's a great climax involving like fire and smoke and this bizarre like hazy filter going on over everything. That's just great use. I mean, you can already tell like there's going to be some clever uses of like cinematography and special effects based on the fact that the apartment that Eloise is in is right next to a neon sign. So at all times of night, there's this bright red glow just flashing into a room. It's like, oh, that's perfect. Just great little moments of cinematography in there. Like I said, the twist is kind of a mixed bag. But I feel like once they get there, they don't just rely on it. They actually like play it out into its like darker and more like surreal end there. So like in terms of just atmosphere and style, I could totally recommend the film on that alone. The twist is kind of going to be the iffy part, and I think mostly because of that and because the messaging kind of gets mixed towards the end there. This might actually be Edgar Wright's weakest film. And for a lot of people, the twist alone is going to make it Edgar Wright's weakest film by far. But in terms of being more of like kind of like a psychological horror with this kind of like this like love affair with like the 60s, but also showcasing the dangers of nostalgia on that angle, I feel like it's a pretty interesting film. Like without a doubt, it's definitely one of like Edgar Wright's weaker films, but still a very fun film, very atmospheric film. And in terms of being like one of his first like supernatural horror films, I'd say it's pretty damn good. Does a great job with like visual effects. I love the casting here. Everyone is great in this. There's a few surprises along the way, a decent sleight of hand for this mystery, and just surprisingly terrifying in certain spots. So yeah, it's a pretty neat little horror film from Edgar Wright, who usually delivers like fast-paced films, which he does here. It's just like he doesn't rely on action and not so much humor, mostly because it's a darker story involving like abuse and like terrifying violence. So he leans into that angle, and for the most part, I feel it works.